Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. I am Many Ninjas, and I am not alone.
Yes, not only is he not alone, he's got a lovely booster seat to pump up his position so we can all look up at him in awe. I'm Carlos Alcazar. He's Many Ninjas, and we're here to talk about the Retro Trio.
Super Retro Trio to be exact.
Lovely. So originally, actually, this is kind of a collaborative video that we were planning on doing for this anyway. I'm going to try to actually look at the camera. That'll going to throw me off a little bit. But we were originally going to do the video for it, and also I had recorded an unboxing for that system. Unfortunately, I took a look at the footage, and it came out really grainy, kind of dark, and the audio ended up really bad. So other than reshoot it again when really it wasn't an unboxing anymore, we decided just going to take it straight from here. So the purpose of the video is just to give you a review from two perspectives. So you have more of a casual gamer, somebody who bought the system because they don't really have the space to be putting 3 or 4 systems together in the same place, and also somebody who does actually have the systems, but at the same time just to get the different impressions on how the system goes.
Alright, well, as generally, just to bring it back on screen, the general premise of the system is that it is indeed something that can play multiple systems at once. Namely, the standard ones they advertised were the Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Nintendo System along with Super Famicom carts, and Genesis System, as well as Mega Drive versions. And to mention on the Super Nintendo and Genesis, basically it does claim compatibility with most, if not all, games, including those that would be, I believe, PAL region as well, since they do happen to have some extra switches down here, which I will now demonstrate, showing they indeed do have a couple of different things. Basically for Genesis controllers, Super Nintendo and Nintendo controllers, and a few of these little switches in here allow you to switch between the controller ports, which basically helps if you're trying to play with the original controllers meant for the systems, as well as the setting for playing with NTSC. I believe P is referring to one of the different European ones. I don't remember off the top. No, PAL is actually the very last one, PA.
Mm-hmm.
P, I actually can't remember what that one exactly is, ladies and gentlemen. So
it's another region.
Must be another region. And J is basically your Japanese, Asian market regions. And PA is definitely the last one, PAL, which also adjusts for I think it was 50 megahertz television setup.
That's about right. Yep.
Yeah.
So let me just take this real quick, and I'll just add something. So even though I can't do the unboxing now at this point, I do want to point out that I got this here in Canada for $69.99, which is actually not too bad. As far as I know, it comes in 2 versions. I've got the silver and black version, but there's also a black and red version, which looks pretty sleek. He showed you kind of the front of it just to show you the different connections. It does let you use the original controllers, but it also does come with its own. Just a quick review of what's in it, just so you know. You get the system itself. You get 2 Super Nintendo clone controllers with a Sega Genesis connection, which is kind of an interesting thing that will go right in here. They are mapped out so you can use them for a lot of the different systems without any problem. On the back of it, it's pretty straightforward. You got your standard AV power. You've got your yellow, white, and red RCA connection, and then you've got S-Video also if you want to get a little bit nicer quality picture. The front of it is pretty straightforward. You got the 3 slots for the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Super Famicom here. Everything just pops in and then pops right out like that. And then the Genesis, of course. And I believe it also does play the Mega Drive.
Yeah, well, very much.
We did try it out with the Mega Drive as well, and it played with no problem.
Oh, I did actually leave out some extra compatibility that is advertised actually directly on the box. It actually does mention specifically that it does function with the Super Game Boy adapter. So yes, technically you can play your Game Boy, or they work, Game Boy Color games on there as well as a special adapter they made that is compatible with this, made for Game Boy Advance titles, which can either run in the system directly fine, or even run as part of a standalone thing, but it's advertised as sold separately, just to give you a heads up on that.
Yeah. So basically that does give you a lot of compatibility. Gives you a lot of different systems you can play it on through different ways. And on the front of it, other than that, it's really just the reset button, and then the power connection, which gives you Genesis, Super Nintendo, and Nintendo. So I'll just zoom in on that a little bit, just so you can get a little bit of view. It'll take a second to zoom. See if that actually... probably not. It's okay. What I'll do at the end is we'll take a couple of pictures And at the end, we're going to have a little montage of some gameplay. We are going to play something here. Many Ninjas is actually going to play a game when we cut. But we'll show a little montage of some gameplay footage. But at the same time, also, we'll do a couple of close-ups of it, just in case you're curious what it actually looks like. I do just want to say, like I said, no unboxing, so here's what's left. You got the two controllers, and then this one here is something that's a little understated, but it should be pointed out. The power connection is just one simple connection that going into a very small and very compact power brick. It's not really anything too crazy.
Yeah.
Retrobit was very smart here because if anybody who has power bars and other electronic gadgets that you want to put on it, this is very reasonable.
I would point out, but basically most standard power bars or kind of power outlets for most of the things are the gigantic brick ones where, especially if you're trying to line up multiple of them for some of those systems, they're all the same general size brick, which really take up, give or take, 2 spots or so.
Yeah, this one you can get away with. This one will take 1 spot on your regular power outlet, or 1 spot on your, on your power bar adapter. No problem. This is fine, and that's more than enough power to run the system. And that right there is a great feature.
Yeah. And in terms of its video connectors, as mentioned, it's got your standard RCA, your red, white, and yellow one, as well as the S-Video one for where applicable. Pretty much all as part of the general package here.
Yeah, and then to keep it straightforward, what was left in it, literally everything was cradled inside of a clear see-through plastic, and then you get a little small manual that just contains how to connect a couple of the different connections and a little bit about what I can do. But other than that, it's very sparse on the packaging, but it lets you get right down to the game part, which is the important part. So that's kind of it for the intro. We will talk a little bit more about the system, but why don't we get to a little actual gameplay?
We'll be back right after a quick jump where I start connecting things.
Alright everybody, so this is the footage that we were talking about. So we're doing kind of a split screen thing, so we're going to be looking at the TV while we're talking, but just so you can understand. So now you can see the game that we're actually playing. Many Ninjas is going to play Magic Sword for the Super Famicom, just to show off what it can do.
We're playing with the default Retrobit commercial, or controller I should say. So this is a pretty good actual replication of a Super Nintendo controller. We'll start from the beginning.
So I'll let Mini Ninjas play here for a moment, but I'll just make a couple of points, and then I'll let him interject as he's doing so that he can concentrate a little bit. So the thing is, as we said, the Retrobit controller that comes with it is already mapped out to Super Nintendo. So Super Famicom is basically the same thing, so obviously he's good to go. He can do what he wants to do. We did test it out, and I personally tested out when I had it in my home first, with, you can still play Sega Genesis games with this, because it is mapped out to allow you to do it. You can also play Nintendo games with it. But if you don't want to, and we tested this as well, you can use your own Nintendo controllers, you can use your own Sega Genesis controllers. We were actually playing in one of the clips at the end, a little montage, you're going to see maybe a race that we were playing with Super Mario Kart. We were using 2 regular Super Nintendo controllers that you could have at any time. So for the most part, we'll cover that a little bit in the conclusion, but just so you can get an idea, the reason why I ended up buying this for myself, from the casual standpoint, one of the biggest pros of this for me, like I showed you that power brick was very small, that's very good. The space that the unit takes up, it's a super, super light box, which is really great. But having the ability to play all of these systems, including Super Famicom, which I hadn't had the chance to play as much, because it just wasn't around when we were kids. But having the chance to be able to play all these systems out of one box is a huge space saver. So for a more casual person, for me, it's really great. For somebody who is a little bit more into games with a bigger game library like Mini Ninjas, it works, obviously he's going to have the real systems.
Yeah.
But for me in my home, it's not a very convenient thing for me to be able to sit there and go, okay, so I'm going to play Genesis, so I need a Genesis. Great. Well, I've got Super Nintendo games, so I'm going to need the Super Nintendo as well, so now we got these 2. That's great. And then, I got my old classic games. Sorry, my audio is probably a little low now. So I was saying, you've got those, and then, of course I want to play my old classic games, so I'm going to need the classic Nintendo. Well, that's great. You can get all of these still at this point, if you look around. That's not a big deal. But just imagine if you are a little confined for space, or if you've got other things you want to be doing with your living room, then this, along with this is not the most practical solution if you're you know, want to keep the space down. And that still doesn't take into account the Super Famicom, which is about the same size as the Super Nintendo. So this all comes out of that one box. So it's just a space thing, you know, efficiency.
Technically, in case you're wondering, yes, it is possible to modify the systems in order to play the import titles, but that requires either you get a few extra bits, realistic, not too hard, or to physically modify the consoles in order to actually accomplish much, or get a relevant converter in some cases. What I will mention is there actually are a handful of compatibility issues I did come across in my personal library. Most games worked, but a few notable exceptions did include Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse for the NES, which displayed a few visual issues to start up and actually stalled after the very first kind of cinema scene leading into the first stage. The game would actually pretty much crap out at that point.
Now, other than that, I think you found that for most of the games you didn't really have too much trouble getting them to work.
Yeah. Obviously, your Super Effects stuff, so basically stuff like your Star Fox and such, worked fine. Some games that experienced some problems in the past with earlier systems, such as the Mega Man X2 and 3, also were working at this point. It hadn't occurred to me to try it earlier, but during one of my last testings, I tried Virtua Racing for the Genesis. Unfortunately, it did not work, didn't actually boot up at all. But for the most part, when I was trying stuff on the library, 90% of it worked, I would say.
Yeah, so the big one for that was just having, like I said, for somebody who has a library like what Many Ninjas has for all the different kinds of games, the systems that he likes to play, it's going to be a big deal that certain games don't play. Like Virtua Racing is actually kind of a fun game. I remember playing it years ago. Not being able to play that is unfortunate. But like I said, for the majority, for the majority of the library, he only was able to find a handful of games that he couldn't play. So this system here uses like hardware emulation. They replicated it with the hardware. So that kind of contrasts with the other system I was looking at, because kind of the famous one right now is the Retron 5 that does play, it advertises playing even more systems with all the extra connections and all the extra areas that you can plug in. But that's software emulation, which is really great for the save states and for those things. But then when you take into account that you're sitting there waiting for the system to download the ROM and then start playing it, that has its advantages because you can do all the save states and put cheats in and do all that. But whenever I turn this one on and put this game in, I flip the on switch, set it to the right setting already, ready to go, put in my controllers, and the game just starts.
In case you're wondering, as I mentioned, I am playing with the VirtuaBit, and this handles really well regardless of the system it's meant to emulate there. Basically, in terms of your Super Nintendo, Super Famicom, it treats like a standard controller. For your Genesis, Mega Drive games, YBA become your ABC, and for Nintendo Famicom titles, if you have a converter to play the Famicom setup, Y takes the place of A, B is still B, and everything else is pretty standard.
Now I hadn't had the chance to play with the Super Nintendo controller in a while, but I felt like the buttons and the way they felt when you were pushing them, the two top buttons and the regular buttons, it felt pretty much the same as when I originally had a Nintendo. The build quality on the control was actually pretty good. So how would you compare the Super Nintendo controls to the one in your hand right now?
Super Nintendo, Super Famicom to this are actually a pretty good fit. I'd say, especially with this kind of game, I'm not having any issues at all with the controls right now. Basically, if there's anything going on, unfortunately, it's actually user error at this point, more than anything else.
Yeah. So that's the big one. So compatibility was a big thing. So for the, for the more hardcore gamer, we were talking about it, and for the more hardcore gamer, you probably wouldn't buy one of these, only because you probably do have the systems. Like those systems that I just pulled off and stacked in front of you, those are all Many Ninja systems. The Genesis is actually mine, but I haven't used it in years, so I left it here, and he's been using it for a long time. But the other systems are in his possession right now. But realistically, if you're somebody who's a little bit more casual like myself, somebody who likes to still be able to play the games when they want to play them, I don't have as much time as I'd like to be able to play some of them, but I can just go, it's already in my living room, I put in the game that I want right on top of the machine, flip it on, put the controller, and I'm already good to go. It's really nice. But we did think of one use case that I did think, was valid. It is pretty good if you're in a situation where you're going to be maybe traveling. Like, say, for example, you're someone that likes to go to those gaming conventions, like the Portland Retro Gaming Expo. Maybe you want to go. Maybe you want to be able to try some of these games in your hotel room. RCA cables come already with it. You can take a couple of controllers, and the system already plays about 4 or 5 systems, depending on what, connections you add onto it. So realistically, you could be trying your games already in the hotel room right after. It's nice to be able to do that, and the system itself, it's a bit of a catch-22. It's extremely light, so it's that's really handy and very great for being portable. You do kind of have to keep in mind, though, that because it is so super light and the plastic is kind of thin, you do feel like sometimes you have to be a little bit careful because you feel like you could break it if you were a little bit violent with taking it. Also, you did notice some things with the pins when you were putting some of the games in.
In the case, specifically with the pins for the Nintendo Entertainment end of things, I found the pins to be really tight, and if you have any games that it feels like the plastic is a little on the compromised end, like unfortunately was the case with my copy of Tecmo Super Bowl that I have here, you can actually risk accidentally breaking some parts of the plastic for the actual cartridge holder itself, which was why my copy of Tecmo Super Bowl is right now actually inside of a shell for Dragon Warrior, just because the little plastic tabs on the inside of the card broke to such an extent that it can't actually hold the cartridge in place well enough to play it on either this or a standard Nintendo right now. It broken on both sides.
So we should point out that it is something to keep in mind. It's not really a defect per se, it's just that the pins are pretty tight. But what we can suggest is that if you do want to get one of these, just be careful. Don't be careful when you're putting the cartridge in, and be careful when you're taking it out, because especially at first, when you first get it, for some of them it will fight you a little bit, just because it requires a lot of effort to actually take the card out. But otherwise, I found my experience with it was really good. I enjoyed the fact that the controller that comes with it is actually pretty solid build quality. I like that the power bar for itself is actually really small, so it fits in my power bar beautifully with all the other electronics I have in my living room. And being able to just pop the games in, they come reliably. The Super Famicom games look good, the Super Nintendo games looked really good, the Sega Genesis looked great, and the Nintendo looked exactly like I remember. So a lot of my games, a lot of my collection is old baseball games, so I've been able to play all the different eras of them. They look the way they should, and they sound the way they should, which is actually really great. So did you have anything that came to mind in regards to like the picture or the sound? Did it feel
I'd say
alright to you?
actually, in terms of picture quality, it's very good picture quality. Arguably, in some cases, actually better than the original system. Although I should actually mention regarding recording, such as I'm actually using, as I mentioned, the Dazzle HD recorder in order to get this footage that we're showing it right now. I did notice there's a bit of a curiosity when it came to getting Genesis-based footage, which I'll actually show a bit during the kind of later vignette. It actually, the footage best described as it was a little on the shaky side, and there was a bit of flickering, which when I tested the same games again in on an actual Genesis, in the case the Genesis Mark II, it did not appear there. So it seems to be something that's just kind of particular to this setup. It doesn't make the thing any less playable. In fact, on the actual TV, everything displays just fine. But it's just something to make note of in terms of if you happen to be using this for recording purposes.
I think that one thing that you have to keep in mind, the reason why I wanted to do this review from two sides was that if you're reviewing like retro games, you probably have the actual system. You probably are going to just run it right off that. So you're probably not going to use one of these for that realistically. But the point that he made was key. The actual video, when you're looking at it, playing the game, you didn't notice any of those issues. So, if you are going to use it to record, you certainly can. We're doing it right now, so you're seeing some of the footage. But that's probably not going to be your normal thing that you're going to do. So that covers, reliability, kind of the use cases, the scenarios where I can see using it. from that, we're not going to drone on forever about this, but I would say from a verdict standpoint, for the more casual gamer, somebody who's playing sometimes and wants to have this option, the portability is huge. They did think some of these things out very well. I'm actually really happy with the purchase, and it's a great value for the money and a great space saver for somebody in my situation.
I can get him back to level 8. I need the most powerful ninja here.
See, now he's in the zone. He's in it now. So, did you have just any main concluding thoughts about the system itself there?
Generally speaking, if you're having a setup where you don't have as much space and you're kind of on a starting end of the collection, ouch. This is actually a pretty good kind of setup for the system there. Most of the things which I came across, like the small little thing about the Genesis output video if you're recording, they're relatively minor. The other minor thing that comes to mind is if you happen to switch the toggle on the system for Super Nintendo controllers, those actually only really register properly if you're playing the appropriate system, so you can't exactly have your Super Nintendo controllers, your actual ones, to play NES games, as I noticed. However, if you have anything set to the Genesis thing, especially if you're using their default controllers, everything works fine all across the board. But basically, everything I've mentioned is relatively minor. There are a few things that aren't compatible, basically some things that run special chips that people don't really look for, like Virtual Racing, for instance. But in terms of compatibility, it's actually pretty good overall. And generally, you're actually dealing with the whole original game than something that's basically an emulated version that downloads the ROM on there, which I find is actually a very good thing. I would say, especially for Bang the Bug, I would recommend this over the named alternative already, the Retron 5, in terms of how it handles things.
I just think the killer. The Retron 5, don't get us wrong. I think the Retron 5 is a neat gadget. I just think that when I compared, because I had them both side by side in the store when I was there. When I compared the Retron 5 at almost $170 to this one for $70, the $100 difference just didn't make any sense. The save states and all that is really great, but if I want to play an emulator, well then I can play an emulator on my computer. I loved having a hardware-based one where I flip the switch, the game starts. There's not a download process. You don't get save states, but you know what? We're playing the game kind of the way we wanted to. If the game's really hard, the game's really hard. That's the way it was. If you had the original consoles, you weren't going to get save states. That's just the way it was. So I'm quite content with that. So I think that's enough of us droning on. Many Ninjas is going to play this game a little longer because I think he's into it right now. But then I think at the end of the video, I think it'll be just a montage of some of the gameplay footage we recorded.
Basically, yeah, we have over the past little bit done a little extra recording, covering a few different systems, a few different games, including some stuff that basically covers some of the more problematic games in kind of past versions of this sort of kind of system. So that's going to be included there, but I'll also be including some of the footage in terms of some issues there. One thing I did forget to mention, one second, I'm going to pause actually as I say this because I want to be more paying attention, is for certain things, especially if you're trying to record stuff using something like the Hauppauge HD PVR unit, or it's the second version of that one for the gaming edition stuff, there has been some known issues where you need to kind of do some workarounds in order to record the original systems properly. That still actually applies with the Super Retro Trio, so I'll include a short little clip in there of me attempting to record originally with that device in there, which I'll kind of mention with a special title that this is what you might expect to see. So it's just a general idea of how recording for this sort of thing works overall, as well as with recording for the actual Dazzle unit itself, just to kind of show how things normally look, with the exception of the Genesis, in which I'll put an extra note there explaining what you're seeing there in terms of any flickering and such.
So overall, that's it for this portion of it. The rest of it will be the montage, showing a couple of clips of a couple of different things. Thanks to Mini Ninjas for providing this glorious overlay so that you're seeing everything. So you can see myself. I think, is this one going on your channel or mine?
I think just because of availability and the fact I need to edit this, it might be just popping on my channel just because I have all the editing stuff here.
Okay. So I'll link to it. We'll talk about it. There'll be a little video just connecting one to the other. Yeah. But in any event, our contact, the contact information is underneath. At Twitter, he's at Many Ninjas, and I am ManyNinjas.com. I'm at Carlos Alcazar 2 and CarlosAlcazar.org. So that was basically our little review of the Super Retro Trio. We'll include the little gameplay. You'll be able to see a couple of different games, not just this one, so that you can check that out. And, you know, that's a recommendation from my standpoint, and I think you also recommended it, just depending on what you're actually after. If you've already got all the systems, well then, you know, why are you watching a review on it? But otherwise, if you have a use for it, this is a pretty good solution for the price.
Alright, well, thank you everyone for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment. And if you have anything else to say about this thing, any other questions, just feel free to put them in the comment section on this, and we'll try to answer as best as possible. Either on Carlos' channel or on mine, depending on where this video eventually ends up. So take care, everyone. As of the time of this recording, it's actually December 25th, so Merry Christmas to everyone. And see y'all later.
We're working on Christmas.
You call this work? I call this me playing video games. Which I'm going to continue now. Take care. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, due to the length of the review up to this point, I'm actually going to be putting the gameplay specific recordings on a separate video, which I'll be linking to on the screen as you're seeing it right now. And that'll be coming up very shortly after I make the initial recording or upload here. Thanks for watching. Take care.